Hi everybody, this is episode 268 of the Intercooler podcast with Dan Prosser and Andrew Frankel. And I suspect this week we're going to do a lot of motorsport, a lot of F1, probably some Le Mans, but I think we could do some road cars as well, because we're joined by Alex Brundle, racing driver, historic racing team founder, commentator, pundit, F1 pundit. You're a busy man, Alex. Thanks for finding the time to come and join us.
Thank you very much for having me. Yeah, it just shows me that little intro, very kind intro, shows me how many jobs I've agreed to.
Yeah.
I don't remember agreeing to all of them, but I definitely have, and it's now given me quite a lot of responsibilities this year, but all good fun stuff.
Well, we can tell you're a professional, a media professional these days, because you've got a proper setup there. I don't know where you are, but you've got a studio setup, you've got a good mic, you've got some soundproofing boards on the wall. I mean, clearly, this is not your first podcasting rodeo.
This is my little HQ in London, and I kind of, eventually I'm going to have to unglue all of the sound deadening, which I'm not looking forward to, because I will eventually move out of here. But it gets to the point where, quick Wi-Fi and a bit of wall dressing is your friend, because you end up doing kind of so much of this kind of thing. Yeah. And the old London Wi-Fi gets lent on pretty hard.
Yes. Now, this is a little bit awkward because we're recording this on the Monday of Le Mans week. And clearly you're a Le Mans guy. This isn't actually going to go out until the Monday after Le Mans week, Andrew. So, if it's a cracking Le Mans, you and I are going to have to jump on and do...
Yes, if there's like 5 or 10 minutes right at the end of this podcast all about Le Mans, what has happened is we've gone there, it's been an amazing race, and we just suddenly thought, oh shit, we better get something out there. So that's it. But if it's a really dull race...
we won't bother.
We won't bother.
But I'm going to put you on the spot, Alex. Who's going to win?
Oh, who's going to win? Who's going to win one of the most competitive Le Mans 24 hours there's ever been? Yeah, no, that's a great way to start a podcast, isn't it?
Just irritate the guest.
Who do I think is going to win? I think... So Le Mans is its own balance of performance, right? So this is my justification for a rubbish guess, which I know is going to go straight out after Le Mans.
Yes.
Ferrari have been dominant in the World Endurance Championship so far this year. The established paddock wisdom is having taken now a couple of victories at Le Mans in the modern era. Ferrari are now focused on the World Championship, which is why they've gone out of the blocks so hot.
Interesting.
Potentially not... what's the polite way to say sandbagging? Well, I've just said sandbagging, haven't I? So hard in the early part of this year. And thus are going to be not as strong at Le Mans this year.
Well, that's sensible. You throw Le Mans and win the World Championship.
Well, they've taken a couple of victories at Le Mans, haven't they?
Yes. Already,
yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely mega.
And I think the first of those in 23 was at least partly, there was a sort of last minute change in the balance of performance, which they'd said they weren't going to do. And although I think Ferrari ran a great race and thoroughly deserved it, I think last year it was absolutely no excuses, a terrific win, wasn't it?
It really was. Yeah, they AF Corsa are an unbelievable endurance team. You know, from when they were running GT3 cars, GTE cars, indeed they still do. So they put a good car out on the racetrack. Whether they will be put in the position this year to win again, I don't know. I think, you're looking at a Toyota Porsche, probably, as a pure guess, just on the basis of it being its own balance of performance. But it's anyone's guess, and it depends. We've had a couple of years now, also affected in varying degrees by weather, either in the testing or the racing. So that's always a factor as well. It's an impossible one to call.
Okay, fair enough.
Apart from the fact that everybody listening to this will already know.
Yeah,
exactly.
Okay. Now, listen, we'll talk a little bit about Dad, Martin Brundle, later on. One of the things that I know your dad said is that his racing career, his time in F1, was really sort of an apprenticeship for his F1 commentating career. Do you sort of feel the same, that all your racing, be it in single-seaters, in sports cars, in historics, was in part to give you this grounding, this expertise, this experience, so that you could communicate motorsport with the rest of the world with authority?
It certainly wasn't intended that way. I was definitely supposed to be a Formula One driver by now.
Yeah.
That was
Same,
that was
actually.
the path, or indeed a work sports car driver. But
Yeah.
it's definitely working out that way. People keep on coming up to me and saying things like, explaining motorsport is
Yeah.
what you were put here to do. Which is a real shame. I really wish doing motorsport was what I was put here to do. I think being a motorsport pundit is quite a doomed role, because it's a role to be any good at you have to not want to do. Because to be a good motorsports pundit, I think you really have to want to be in the car.
Yeah.
Yes, of course.
And so actually, it's almost like a kind of this weird, torturous
Yeah.
kind of endeavor where you've got to not want to undertake the job to actually do it. But it's certainly working out that way. Yeah.
So how did it sort of come about? Because you were racing a lot and very successfully, and then it seems almost by a sort of process of osmosis, you kind of started. You put a toe into this world, and now it seems to have taken over your entire life.
Yeah, it was a confluence of things, really. So the world of hypercar that we were just discussing actually sort of finished me off a bit in a sports car. I was a LMP2 pro for years. I've been sort of ploughing that furrow relatively successfully. And, LMP2 teams needed and could sustain, which is obviously, for those who are not up with their sports car racing who might be listening, it's kind of the second tier of endurance, what is now the Formula 2 of endurance racing, really. They could sustain a pro who would do the job, who would, be polite and quick and all of that kind of thing. The advent of hypercar changed the way the LMP2 operated, where young drivers all of a sudden saw a big career in a hypercar, and it massively inflated the value of those LMP2 seats to the point where drivers were paying sort of up to €1 million for them. And at that point, you can't really blame a team that much.
No,
Because they're good drivers, aren't they?
Yeah, you look at it, and these people are not rubbish. They're both wealthy and very good. And so at that point, I was kind of staring it in the face, right? So you decide what you're going to do next. Back in 2013, straight off the back of driving in GP3, Will Buxton came and fished me out of the paddock at the British Grand Prix because somebody had dropped out to do the commentary for what was then GP2 and GP3 that I'd been racing the year before in 2012. So I connected with that commentary. I did one in Silverstone. They asked me to carry on in Spa. They asked me to carry on in Monza that year. And I kind of then had a works Bentley test in a GT3 car and let them down really late and quite badly because my priority was still very much sports car racing at that point. And that bit sort of ended. So at exactly the point where I was looking at the end of me being able to realistically not find an OEM hypercar seat, getting ousted by kids paying loads of money in LMP2, I met again at the RAC club where I was doing an incredibly boring speech with Mike Conway about Le Mans that was coming up that year, the bloke who'd hired me. And it he kind of went, do you want to come back and do some commentary? And I blended out of one and into the other from there. Okay. So again, it's one of those weird sort of like simultaneous lots of things happening kind of
and did you always find it easy to do? I mean, I have commentated on a couple of things, and on both occasions found it so much more difficult than I could ever have imagined it. I mean, clearly, it's in your family. But that commentator you did at Silverstone, was that the first time you'd ever broadcast live to anyone?
Yeah, and I've been really lucky in that people have always been really pleasant to me about, whether commentary is good or not is so unbelievably subjective.
Yes.
Right. But people have always been nice to me about it. So I always kind of assumed it was going reasonably well. But yeah, no, I never had to think about it. I never had to think about it. There's a bit at the start of every new season where you go on air for the first time and you go, oh, okay, this broadcast is only what I'm going to say for the next 45 minutes. wow, right, okay, cool. That's a lot of dead air to fill. But it just has always just flowed for me. And I've been lucky to work with amazing people as well.
Yeah.
Like so lucky, because it can be so bad and it's been so great, for me.
Well, let's talk racing because you're a racing driver. You karted as a kid. You raced single seaters a lot. I mean, were you aiming for F1? You mentioned it earlier that you wanted to be an F1 driver. Was that your dream?
It was incredibly naively my dream at the time. I think we were naive to it. I kind of obviously I went through my young life idolizing my father, but as far as he was concerned, you look at sort of his story, how he arrived in the world of Formula One, right? As far as he's concerned, you race banger races in Pot Row in Kings Lynn, right? Steal a Toyota Celica from your grandfather's forecourt, hire from your father's forecourt, hire a roll cage, smash a roll cage into it, then go British touring car racing, right? Do a bit of Formula Ford 2000, and cold write to a bloke called Ken Tyrrell, who asking him to drive his Formula One car. I'm sure it's slightly more complicated than this, but essentially that bloke goes, "Yeah, all right."
That's just nuts, isn't it?
There was a bit of an F3 with a bloke called Senna involved in there as well, wasn't there?
Exactly that. But even that, you look at it, and there's a year of funding from Racing for Britain, stickers back in the 80s, and then a full-on run out of money year where Calvin Fish takes his drive with Dave Price, and he ends up with Eddie Jordan, right, in Formula 3. And at that point, they puts that season together, and that's it, right? So, the world had changed so much by the time I embarked upon the shores of junior motorsport.
Of course.
And I'll never forget my dad's face sitting across from the team owner. I think it was a guy called Mark Hines, who now helps out Lewis Hamilton in the Formula One paddock. And he sat and he genuinely said £800,000 to my father. And my father just looked at him like... dumbstruck at the pure change and cost. So we were kind of naive, but that was the dream.
What was your dad's approach to you going racing? Was he always foursquare behind it? Was he thinking, well, that's what the lad wants to do, that's what he wants to do? I don't imagine he was against it.
Massively for it.
Yeah.
Massively for it. But in a low-key way. In a way where he didn't want to appear to be.
And not going to spend £1 million a year on it.
Sure. I mean, I think we went go-karting for sort of these numbers are not things that are available to everyone. I'm more than aware of that, but we went go-karting for 10, 12 grand a year.
Yeah.
I never did a British championship. And that was his philosophy. Is just that if you're any good, you'll make it.
Do you feel like you never quite got the chance to show what you could do in single seaters?
No, I had a chance. And I think it's important for us young drivers to, us young drivers, 35-year-old young driver here, us drivers to acknowledge where we could have done better as well. You know, I see a lot of woe is me kind of,
if only,
That's so refreshing to hear. Isn't it? It's so unusual to hear that.
Yeah. No, I did 2 seasons of Formula Palmer Audi where all the cars were the same and I could have won. In either of those seasons. And then I did a couple of seasons of MSV Formula 2 again, got unfortunate in some instances, but I look at it and I think there are 2 things. If we'd have had, Lance Stroll money, I'd have driven a Formula 1 car, but so few people do. If I was Lewis Hamilton good, I would have driven a Formula 1 car as well, but I wasn't. So here we are.
You need one or the other, don't you?
Yeah.
Ideally both.
Yeah. Ideally both, yeah. But so it seems to me that it was when you switched to sports car racing that things really got going from a career point of view for you. Why was that? Did it just suit you better?
Yeah, it did. Massively better. So I'm a little bit in the Lando Norris school of motoring in that my motorsport career is very much Alex Brundle versus Alex Brundle. In the, get out of your own way stuff, right?
So interesting.
Qualifying was never my strongest session. Yeah. I am someone who was extremely quick in my moment. up there with the fastest professionals in a sports car, but it used to take me a couple of laps to calm down enough to really deliver it. So, I was pretty good right from the beginning, right? But like, to be up there with your kind of Robin Frienses, Rene Rast, Mike Conway's, guys who are now driving hypercars, it just took me a couple of laps of like, okay, we're here at Le Mans, let's all just calm down about that. And let's deliver the laps. So that's why sports car racing suited me massively better.
And also
yeah.
Sorry, I was just going to say it's a completely different mindset as well, isn't it? Because in a single seater, when you're in the car, it's just about you. Whereas when you're in a sports car, it's all about bringing the thing back in the right number of bits, in the right condition, to hand over to someone else. So you have to be a lot less selfish, much more the team player, than you ever do in single seaters. And I'm guessing that played to your strengths as well, because you're probably, I don't know whether you are. Some people I think were just maybe landed one of them. You're just too nice to be that ruthless and that much of a killer to make it to the absolute top of the top.
Yes, I do agree with you. Although sports car racing has gone more and more in that way itself.
Yeah.
So sports car racing these days is kind of essentially duplicitous in that you kind of have to, in some way, appear to play that game.
Yeah.
But it's not like the old days, where if you broke the gearbox, then you broke the gearbox and it's over. The cars will take it. So now everybody says it's all about the team game, but these drivers are still evaluated by pure pace on an average lap basis.
Yes.
So it gets a little bit more in that way as well. But it is a thinking driver's game still, and I think to try to find a way to put it politely, some of the guys who were brilliant at managing the pressure in a single seater and even a top sports car, and unbelievably quick, who I raced with, were that way because they didn't. I think the nice way to say it is they didn't think too hard about things.
Yeah.
Yeah, no imagination.
Things, including the bloke who's standing in the pits waiting to take the car from him.
Exactly that. Yeah, didn't think too hard about it and just got on with it. Whereas, some of the more thinking drivers I know kind of suffer with the pressure more because you're aware of consequence. You think, wow, if I smash this thing to bits, everyone's going to be really disappointed with me, and it's going to be another year till we can come back to Le Mans again. In some way, I really wish I was cured of the capacity for that thought.
Yes, but basically, you need an imagination removal.
But it's that imagination that makes you a good communicator and will sustain you for the next 30, 40 years, isn't it? So one of our contributors and friends is Karun Chandok, and he told us that when he switched to sports car racing, he realised that one of his real strengths as a driver was being quick while being very fuel efficient, which is clearly really important in endurance racing. So I just wondered if you had any particular strong suits, any real attributes that came to the fore as a sports car racer.
Yeah, tyre and brake management. So it got to the point where, I did it LMP2 8 times at Le Mans, LMP1 once.
Yeah.
And it got to the point where you'd tell me, let's say I was doing 6.7 litres a lap in fuel. My engineer could say a fuel number over the radio during a lap, and I could hit that fuel number next lap by feel. So that was kind of one of my strengths. Like, the track and the cars
they must love you then.
They did. Yeah, they did. They mostly loved the people who could pay them €500,000 and still do that. But yeah.
But did you sometimes get an extra stint out of a set of tyres compared to the people you're sharing the car with?
So there's a Le Mans, absolutely that. Sometimes 4 stints instead of 3. There was a Le Mans at the 2021 or maybe 2020. I was driving for United Autosports, and I started 6th. My teammate started 7th. We ended up running 1st and 2nd in the race, but I went a lap longer. And I entered the pit. And as I entered the pit lane, the car effectively conked out on the pit limiter, and I rolled in.
Oh wow!
That kind of thing is what experience gives you in a sports car. But essentially now it moves more and more towards just being outright fast.
Yeah.
And I had a long chat the other day on another project with the boss of Ford Performance's engine program. I was talking to him about technical feedback from drivers, and I just kept on getting the same thing back, which is we don't care.
They don't
The driver's
care.
job is to drive the car.
Wow. It's just speed.
Just speed.
Really? They don't care.
They don't care because
your job is to drive. That's it.
The data's there.
Yeah, but exactly that. He's like, Alex, I have 80 sensors on the engine alone. I just
What are they
don't
doing?
care what you think.
Yeah.
What if what you think is, however fast this car is, if you, I don't know, softened off the front bar a bit, I reckon I could make it go faster. Are they interested in that, or they just go, no, godless?
Definitely. I mean, there's still room for that element of driver feedback, and a lot of this is, by the way, why I love historic motorsport so much, because it's effectively you and a mechanic in the car, right?
Yeah.
And your imagination and your own energies. For sure, driver feel matters. But now I'm a little bit older, and I look back over my endurance racing career. And I think about the times I've fed back information to engineers. It's amazing how much of the time they're just humouring us.
Really, Alex? Well, that's jolly interesting.
Yeah.
Next.
That's so funny.
Yeah. No, it's amazing. I really need the front, the rear. Because effectively they've got information from the CFD, right?
Yeah.
And there's actually really only one way to fly the car where it's efficient. So you've got to stall the floor at the highest speed. Which ditches a load of downforce, and you gain, some kilometers per hour in a straight line. And then you've got to have a most efficient rake in the low speed to get the car to turn properly. And they're effectively mostly telling you what they want you to do in terms of optimizing that setup, rather than you telling them.
And whether you're enjoying the experience of driving the car on that setup or not is really neither here nor there. Your job is just to get out and drive whatever it is they give you.
Professional racing driver.
Yes.
It's not a hobby.
No.
Yeah. Oh gosh, that's so interesting. So you were a really, really high level, top level sports car racer, particularly in the LMP2 category. In LMP3, you won the European Le Mans Series in 2016. It's a serious achievement. What's the greater achievement, that or third overall at Le Mans in 2017 in an LMP2 car?
I think the Le Mans ones will always stand out. Actually, my favorite ever race, the one that I really look back on the most fondly, is winning the Nürburgring 24 hours in class.
Yeah.
For Aston, because that race is just like the last bastion on four wheels. Said. I mean, we've just had the Alamanti team,
course,
but the last bastion of mad circuit racing.
Yeah.
It is. You drive around and you think, this is unbelievable that this is still allowed.
It's a throwback, isn't it?
It's a throwback. But, standing on the Le Mans podium is actually, I have two pictures on the Le Mans podium, which I keep. In both, I look miserable because we've not won. So I'm standing there. One is standing next to a great friend, Olivier Plat. In my second ever Le Mans, our teammates had driven it off the grass, with the wheels spinning, and I can picture in my mind Bertrand Baguette's set of wets. It was the most horrendous Le Mans 2013. Awful rain all night. Bertrand Baguette's tyres just getting traction, rear tyres just getting traction, and he pootles back onto the straight in front of us. They beat us by 30 seconds or something at the end of the race. That's horrible. The other one, I couldn't believe we were there. I was in a Jackie Chan DC racing car, sharing with the boss, and somehow we'd ended up on the podium, but I was miffed because if I'd have been in the other car, we'd have won the race.
Yeah.
It's a shame, really.
Am I right in saying that the other car, there was a moment in that race where it was possible that the other car would have won the race outright?
Yes, yeah. It's
a
the
P2
2017.
Car.
It's the 2017-24.
I was there, I remember it.
Where no one wanted to win, and Nico Hulkenberg eventually passed Ollie Jarvis with an hour to go. But we were 1 and 2. In the race.
Yes.
Jackie Chan DC Racing, which is effectively Jota, who now run the Cadillacs.
Yes.
Great race.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Could we talk about it's historic motorsport. You've mentioned that you really love it because it's you, your mechanic, and the car. I mean, it's a big part of your world these days, isn't it? Under Brundle Motorsport. I mean, is it more raw fun for a driver than an LMP2 car at Le Mans?
Yeah, I mean, it is. That's an escapism from me.
Yeah.
From everything that modern motorsport is and was. Like, you're there as the driver making a difference. You can go and the access to the cars for filming, for fans, for promotion. The cars are the kind of cars that race cars should be. They are extremely loud. They are going sideways while still going fast.
Yes.
They require genuine mechanical skill and ability to drive. So it's a little bit of a crusade from me, that one, actually. Because I don't want those kind of cars to die, but I realize that there are quite a select group of people who have both the ability to be able to drive them and run them, but also the tech savviness to be able to put them on the internet, which is where they need to be.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the next generation won't find them. They must be on the internet.
Yeah.
And also telling the next group of motorsport enthusiasts that Sir Stirling Moss drove it is going to mean nothing to them unless they go and find it out. So they're going to get this on the basis that it's fast and loud and sideways and looks amazing. They're going to find out the other stuff secondhand. So that's a little bit of a crusade, kind of alongside my other activities, really.
So what is of all the stuff that you race in historics? What do you most enjoy being in? I mean, so I know you spend a lot of time in a Mark III B T70, don't you?
Yeah,
the Lola,
yeah.
which is probably, of all the things that I've ever driven, it's probably the thing that I would most like to spend a season doing.
So that is an amazing bit of kit, and that is like an LMP2 car that hates you, pretty much. The better car, there's only one car better than that. The race at the Silverstone Festival, the sports car race, the Big Banger sports car race is my favourite motorsports event of the year. It's up there, that I compete in alongside sort of Nürburgring 24 Hours and that kind of thing. The best car I've ever driven in it is a 512M Ferrari.
Oh God!
Wow.
Which was
don't.
just unbelievable. Unbelievable. So we tried to put a camera in to capture that, and I think it ate 3 GoPros in 3 sessions. The fierceness, the ferocity of the engine, gearbox, chassis combination. Nothing could live for long enough inside it, apart from a helmet camera, which I'm only allowed to wear on a test day. Nothing could live for long enough connected to the chassis of it to actually get proper footage.
It's a GoPro killer.
Yeah.
It's also
it
it's also, this was the car that, although it never was allowed to compete at the top level because Ferrari went off and did something else, this was the car that was finally a match for the 917 Porsche. So there was one race at the Österreich ring at the end of 1970 was the only time the 512M went out against the 917s, and it wiped the floor with them. This is the absolute ultimate sports racing car of the early 1970s. Max Gerardo had one in his showroom quite recently, and I couldn't even fit in it.
Gutting.
So,
Yeah.
Yes.
Gutting.
They're a great thing. It has gates at both ends of the linkage as well. So there's a lot of sort of organising that has to go on to get it to work. And of course, you've got this house money V12 in the back of it. And you're just desperately hoping and praying you don't wrong slot this thing, right, while trying to hustle it, at proper racing speed. But it's basically a T70 with a bit more torque and a better front end, and an Italian soundtrack, more or less.
And I'm guessing 620, 630 horsepower, something like that?
Yeah, must be somewhere around
And
there.
850 kilos, perhaps?
Yes, yeah. It's again slightly lighter,
Yeah.
a chunk more power, but I mean the power delivery is so linear, it's unbelievable. So this thing pulls from $2,000.
Wow.
And you're shifting, just clear of 8.
Oh,
So
that's the thing.
That's a cool car.
And no downforce.
no, well, yeah, they kind of do. It's really weird. Like, so again, we fiddled with them a bit now, and when you don't fit the noses quite properly, you do lose front end.
Okay.
So I doubt they sat there, with any kind of design to generate massive downforce, but it definitely mitigates lift.
Okay.
In some way, which I think is about as good as you're going to
That's
get.
something.
Yeah.
It's something.
Wow.
So yeah, okay. So I understand your crusade, and you're absolutely right. We do want young people rocking up to Goodwood and everywhere else to look at these cars because they're so cool, and we can't allow the interest in them to die out, can we?
No.
But I mean, that aside, what's the plan for Brundle Motorsport? Do you have sort of a big vision for it, or is it a vehicle for you to knock about in cool old cars?
I think it's a bit of both,
Yeah.
So effectively it rolls onwards as well from a partnership I have with Adrian Flux, who started with me at Le Mans, and obviously are a classic insurers extraordinaire.
Yeah.
So they've been kind enough to support it for a number of years. I kind of accumulated cars by snowball and then thought, well, what it would be awesome to do is actually, put in these cars alongside me, people who might reach that kind of audience. So, people who've come across from sim racing to drive real cars, alongside, for example, a couple of weeks ago, we chucked in a guy called Jimmy Broadbent, who is about a million subscriber sim racing YouTuber, alongside 3-time BTCC championship winner Matt Neal, and it's just a kind of a meeting of the worlds, right? Of like in this lovely skiddy 1965 Mustang. So that's been the concept.
Who was quicker?
They did exactly the same lap.
Wow.
In the race.
Fair play to
Exactly
Jimmy
the same
Broadbent.
lap.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, and that's the other thing is that the younger generation in these cars can drive them and are outstanding, which is one of my main findings. So with that brand now, I want to kind of keep on telling that story. Where it goes next, I don't know. We're going to be at Le Mans Classic with our GT40 in a couple of weeks. I'm really excited about that. It's a collaboration with another magazine to tell that story. We might sort of do a bit of a hybrid modern historic program and morph it into a racing team that would hit sort of some GT3 stuff, or we might go and do some sort of tour auto-y kind of road tours with it and tell the story of that part of historic motorsport. But yeah, I like the path we're taking. It seems to be working. People are really connecting with it. So, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. We're going to sort of keep on going and building interesting cars.
Oh, super cool. Should we talk a bit about Dad? Martin Brundle, OBE.
Yes.
He collected his OBE last month from Prince William. A proud moment for the Brundles.
It really was. I was there.
Yeah.
I was. What a privilege it is to be one of the sort of the people to be able to stand there and watch it. We're immensely proud of him, for everything that he's achieved, and also, sort of beavering away in the background on charitable stuff like the Grand Prix Trust and that kind of thing. So yeah, we're super proud of him for that.
So you were, I think, 6 years old when he stopped racing in F1. Do you have any memories of it?
Yeah, definitely. But I kind of disconnected him from himself, in that the Martin Brundle on the screen was not the Martin Brundle that went and came home.
Yeah.
Like, so I was aware that I kind of supported Martin Brundle, and that Dad went away at a time that was oddly similar to the Grand Prix.
There's a pattern.
At that kind of age, you just don't really connect that when he's flying through the air in a Jordan, that is that individual.
Yes.
Within that car.
Yes. No, I saw that clip quite recently. It's still extraordinary. But yeah.
Yeah.
But
so mostly centered around whether he got a trophy. I understood it on a really basic level.
Yeah.
Like, was he going to come back with a trophy? That kind of stuff. What I remember way more closely, because I was a little bit older, are things like the Toyota GT1 program
And the Bentley.
Bentley program. Yeah, that kind of thing.
Let's go back to Le Mans quickly, because in 2012, you took your dad back to Le Mans and raced with him in the LMP2 class.
And he hadn't raced there for 11 years. His last outing there had been in the Bentley in 2001, I think.
Yeah. He was really good. Really,
How did he get on?
Yeah, he was really good that year. I think he eventually set a quicker time than me, I think, in qualifying.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, having come out of, it was my first Le Mans ever, but I was, a single-seater hot shoe at that point. I went a little bit faster by the end of the race once I'd learnt where I was going. His overbearing view was, wow, they've sanitized this place. And that's even sort of before all of the changes to, the Porsche curves that they made after Loic Duval had his big shunt,
Yes.
and, all the changes to Tetra Rouge and everything else. So that was really interesting to see, but a great experience for us both. And it was kind of a bit of a soft launch on Le Mans for me, because to have a friendly face in the garage helped a lot the first time.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. And he won it in 88?
No, not in 88. He won it in 90 with Jaguar.
90
didn't he?
was it?
He got parachuted into the car late in the race, didn't he? Because his car had broken.
Yeah, correct. Which is why when I mean, I'm sure he won't mind me saying this. Whenever you hear him talk about Le Mans victory, he always refers to it as being in the winning team, as opposed to winning Le Mans, because of course he was his car broke and then he was put in the other one, and drove it to the finish.
It's still winning Le Mans. It still counts.
I can remember. So I was retained by Bentley to write a book about them going back to Le Mans. And one of the things I did, I went to a lot of the tests. And I can remember your dad turning up, getting off a plane from Singapore or somewhere, jet lag, turning up to Snetterton, where we were testing this car, which still had a Ford engine in it. And he just got in it and instantly went quicker than whoever had been in it before, and just kept on going. And, this was 5 years after he'd stopped doing Formula One. And then I can remember another test where he'd been out, they do some tyre testing or somewhere, I think we're in Brno or something like that, and just sitting in the truck with him as he was debriefed. And his ability to recall every single lap he'd been on and say things like, oh yeah, you'll think you'll find a lap 13 that I was probably 2/10 off, but I ran a bit wide at turn 5. Just the mental brain power, the processing power, his ability to just completely download everything that he just learned was just extraordinary.
Yeah, and he's still the same now. Still the same now. Even, after driving historics with me, he'll come with 17 different bits and bobs. But it's a real shame, and it kind of harks back to what we were talking about earlier on in the podcast, where, in some way there are sensors on everything now. The race cars are less fearsome. There's more space around the circuits, and that being able to haul ass at 160 miles an hour through the Porsche curves, and then go in the last Porsche curve, the direction change is slightly slow over the first bump, but all right over the second one.
Yes.
Is kind of in some way what he's exceptional at, and where my strengths lie as well. So sensors edited that out, and the racetracks basically aren't frightening enough anymore.
Yeah.
Ugh.
And as much as you've got to get behind safety, you can't sit here and say racetracks should be
more dangerous.
No.
More dangerous.
But that's why you love the Nürburgring, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's why I do. Again, I have it as I had when I first turned up at Le Mans with walls lining the Porsche curves, and as Dad always had, I had instant speed at the Nürburgring, just purely because I guess, technically, and Dad will say exactly the same thing about his career. We're very we're quite genetically close, as anybody who's kind of heard our voices will attest. I think, that kind of being the bloke who will element to it is where Brundle's speed comes from. And that's kind of been edited out of motorsport a little bit.
Do you think you're done with racing modern stuff, or is it still on the cards for you?
I mean, I'm waiting on a call for the Nürburgring 24 hours this year. The world of hypercar and LMP racing has changed to be much more like the world of Formula One, where, you pay your money, you take your choice.
Yeah.
Would I be able, if somebody rang me today and said, our driver's dropped out, we need you to go and drive at the Le Mans 24 hours this week. I know it sounds outlandish, but, or maybe last week or something. Would I take the call? Would I say yes? I would. Yeah, I think I probably would. I would panic, run downstairs, get on the exercise bike, drink 14 protein shakes, and try and do it. Somebody offered me a full season next year. Would I do it? Yeah, probably would. Yeah. And I believe I might be a bit messy with the hands on test day one, but probably sort it. But as I've always said, racing is a career of opportunity. You don't. It's not a choice whether you get to drive racing cars or not. Like we do it when we get to do it.
Yeah.
Right. And often when we make the opportunity to do it. So they're kind of selecting it like advanced physics at a university course is not how racing works.
No, but it sounds like even if the modern stuff is done for you, you'd be very content racing older cars and talking about modern racing, F1 and Le Mans.
Yeah, I mean, I love communicating racing.
Yeah,
I really do. And I think that there's a real environment of sort of misunderstanding of motorsport at the moment, fueled a lot by sort of a lot of instant expert stuff going on. A lot of, for example, I saw a post this week about Max achieving his platinum license. Or Verstappen achieving his platinum license, as though it was something in Gran Turismo, rather than it being like the FIA's driver grading, which will allow him to race at Le Mans should he want to, and all the offshoots of that, and being a process that requires just a application, right? So then there are a sequence of audience members for that post or tweet going, well, of course Max was going to be a platinum. Why wouldn't he be a platinum, etc., etc.? And I'm just sitting there thinking, that's actually such an interesting piece of content because it indicates, where Max's head is at with Formula One at the moment, where he might seek to race in the future, opens a load of doors for him. Someone needs to come in and just explain what that process is, what it means, why he has to do that. Somebody who knows. And it kind of, the world of it all frustrates me immensely at the moment. So I guess I try and be sort of objective and informed as much as I can be. And I think that the world of it, the world of motorsport kind of needs that.
This is so true. It's so true right now because F1, particularly following Drive to Survive and social media, I mean, it's become so tribal, and finding voices of reason within Formula One in particular these days, it's so important because we do need authority figures to explain what's happening, to cut through the noise, to be objective, to call on their own experience and explain what's happening. And that's what you do. And there are a few other guys like you. Jolyon Palmer does a fantastic job as well. Karun does a brilliant job of it. Yeah. We need these people.
We do.
Because otherwise we've just got, frankly, an army of, I won't be rude, but you know what I'm thinking, just supporting their own driver and absolutely denying whatever the reality might be.
Well, I think it's important, again, you can't gatekeep the sport in terms of, everybody has the right to an opinion about sport. Right? I sit down and watch an England football match. I am England manager in 6 minutes.
Yeah, right? You know exactly what to do.
I know nothing. I know nothing about football. I know nothing. But, I'm really, really happy when I do get a pundit, and I'll opine flat out at home into the pixels of my television set, But I'm really, really happy when I get a pundit who just sits there and goes, this is what's happening there. That's what's happening there. That's what's happening there. And doesn't necessarily need to venture an opinion about, just a pure, right, let's just open this door, this door, this door, and this door for the audience, and then let them make their own decision about what's happened. So,
perfect.
Yeah, I try and do that. I don't always succeed, but I try and do that.
No, it's brilliant. Your stuff is very good. So let's talk a little bit about F1 punditry. How many races are you doing this year?
So I do about 16 races a year. I think 6 of them are on site. A lot of them are from F1's HQ in Biggin Hill.
Yes.
Which is, more and more remote punditry. So think what you like about that. I love it. I really enjoy it. And yeah, F1 is a thrilling world at the moment. It's as big as it's ever been.
Are you enjoying this season?
I am. Yeah, I am. I think it's going to become even more interesting now. We've seen the sort of massive upturn that never was with this front wing regulation change, which
made no
doesn't
difference
appear
at
to
all.
have changed the competitive order whatsoever, despite the fact we were all marking out race 9 as the one.
It's hilarious.
So, yeah, I think they're going to have to work really hard now to stop McLaren running away with it, aren't they?
Yeah.
Well, and also that means the one thing that we predicted was going to happen now won't, because Zach won't have to choose between his drivers. It's not like they'll split each other and Max will come through the middle. One or other of them they'll come first and second in the championship, won't they? So they can just let them race.
They will. Yeah, I think they can let them race. I mean, what it's basically done is move the contention from the pit wall to the track, hasn't it? Because you've actually got 2 drivers there. So Lando, if the circuit's front limited, Lando struggles more. Barcelona was a great example of that. Although Lando has more experience for those quirky tracks. I think Monaco is a demonstration of that. The McLaren works everywhere. There'll be cars that come up against it. For example, the Red Bull in Imola, the Ferrari in Monaco. But essentially, the McLaren are going to slowly creep away.
Yes.
Can you think of a teammate rivalry for the World Championship? Rosberg, Hamilton, Prost, Senna, that at some point hasn't boiled over?
Yeah, it's been very polite so far.
Because I can't think of one.
Well, okay, not in recent times. I mean, if you go way back, Fangio and Moss didn't, but then Moss regarded himself very much as the pupil when he was there to learn, and it was only one season. So you're probably right. So it's going to boil over, isn't it? And I think the problem for Lando is that Oscar's really doesn't have any weaknesses, does he? No. And he is as mentally strong as Lando at times appears to be at times vulnerable. So,
yeah, I think, though, what was really interesting about Monaco was Lando was a different driver when he turned up.
Yes.
He just had that total confidence. And it came from nowhere. It came from nowhere. He carried the same demeanour into Barcelona, but the performance just wasn't there on track. Whereas, actually, Oscar sounded, for the first time ever, a tiny bit stressed in Barcelona. He had a little bit of a messy race, but he's, in general, exactly the kind of character that I think the modern... sort of mechanism of junior formulae generates. That kind of ice cold, super mature, almost like computer-esque, type of driver. And I agree with you that there's no obvious weakness there. It's going to be interesting to watch it play out. I asked Lando flat in Barcelona if he felt that between he and Oscar it would boil over at some point during the year. And he looked at me and went, yeah, probably.
Yeah. Well, Zach said that to us, didn't he?
Yeah. I mean, surely it's going to happen. Yeah. It does seem like, okay, apart from the driver's title, this season's a bit of a foregone conclusion. It's a pity because you and I anticipated the greatest season in F1 history, didn't we? Yeah. We thought we'd have 4 teams duking it out, and it didn't happen.
And I think it's just such a shame, particularly that Ferrari haven't turned up this season, because actually at the end of last season they were arguably stronger than McLaren, and it came down to one pit stop, didn't it? That determined the direction of the constructors. So it's the question about what happens next year. My worry about 26 is that somebody gets it more right than anybody else, and then that's it. It's just kind of like set for the duration of those regs.
I think that's inevitable. I think that that's what you're going to have. I mean, with any new era of regulations, there is always one team that steals a march. At the moment, it looks a bit more. I think the hope is more that one engine steals a march, because But
that was enough for Mercedes, wasn't it?
Same engine.
I mean, that was what happened to Mercedes, and they won. What was it? 8 constructors on the trot.
Yeah, and I think that there's every chance that might happen again with the Mercedes engine in 2026. It is a very interesting sequence of regulations. I think there's extremely likely to be a tweak to them when the product hits the track, purely because I think that it's going to be a shock to watch Formula One cars with that much electrification. Certainly going to be a shock for me to watch Formula One cars with that much of electrification take on the racetrack. I don't think this year's done yet. And what I would point to on that is you look at Williams in Barcelona, a team who, a couple of races ago said, James Vowles said, we have taken our foot off the gas in 2025 and we focused entirely on 2026.
Yes.
Their performance in Barcelona, it's not a historically great track for Williams, but it's a circuit that the current Williams shouldn't have been too bad at. They were decent in Imola, very similar, sequence of corners, even though they're a bit more long corners in Barcelona, but similar apex speed, so on. But I think what you saw is the beginning of the lack of development of the Williams. It only takes McLaren to get that balance between 25 and 26 wrong, and Red Bull and Ferrari come charging.
Yeah.
Oh, here's hoping.
And so for 2026, what are you expecting from the cars? I mean, they're going to be a little bit smaller, a little bit lighter, but they'll have push to pass, narrower tyres. Are they going to be more of a race car, less of a qualifying car?
I think it looks at the moment like a formula driven by engine performance. So, you've got 50% electrification. The early feedback was that the cars would be doing things like shifting down at the end of the straights to, keep the engine running. I don't think that's going to be such a problem as they thought. There's been a little bit of a compromise in the way those regulations are going to be delivered, and I think the teams have found more. But you've got an engine formula. I would imagine there are going to be a vast array of strategies in how those movable aerodynamic parts are going to be used. Because, look at it at the moment. You give the teams one DRS flap to play with, right? You've got Red Bull, who are doing incredibly clever things with the management of the beam wing and the floor and the upper flap to maximize that DRS effect. You can see clearly, for example, at Baku that their DRS effect is better than anybody else's. You've got McLaren, who started playing with flexible upper and lower elements of the wing to optimize the effect. Imagine now you've got all of those aerodynamic elements at play. The number of different strategies is going to be vast. And I think the story of the early part of the 2026 season will be who's got the best engine, and how are the FIA going to police the almost infinite sort of offshoots and effects of giving teams multiple movable aerodynamic devices.
Yeah. Do you think, Dan and I, we're both huge Lewis Hamilton fans, but where we differ is I think Dan thinks that, I'm not trying to put words into your mouth here, but Lewis just needs a car that suits Lewis and he'll rise to the top again. Whereas I think, very sadly, that time waits for no man and that he is perhaps not quite the driver that he was, and that in any scenario with any car, he's never going to, over a season, beat Charles and get a championship.
The 26 regulations will be interesting for Lewis. I think this era of car doesn't suit him particularly well. And by this era of car, I mean the most recent regulation tweak where the suspension elements that they used to such great effect at Mercedes were reduced in their complexity, because that's where the Mercedes was absolutely brilliant. Things like, for example, inertia dampers, various different rear suspension parts were simplified in this latest tweak of regulations, with all of the follow wings and everything else. So their dominance at Mercedes was built around an incredibly clever rear suspension system that maximized rear downforce, but also kept the platform incredibly stable, which meant that Lewis could go in very deep, brake very hard, and do Lewis Hamilton things, and he wouldn't overheat the tire, and he could still and he wouldn't overpush the entries. Now the cars are more simple in their suspension, but the drivers still have to manage the platform of the ground effect, which has cost Lewis horribly because he overheats the tyre. My sense is that if you put the full field in cars of 2007, 2008 spec, Lewis Hamilton would still be there on pace. I just think the modern era of motorsport doesn't suit him the very most modern era of motorsport doesn't suit him particularly well, and he's so entrenched now in his mechanisms of driving, and in his techniques of driving, that it's very hard to teach
to unlearn it. Tricks. Yeah, and you don't see anything significant in that regard, at least, changing under the new regs for next year.
I don't think so. I think you would need now teams to unlearn what they know, and you'd need a change of tyre type and manufacturer, which I don't think we'll get. It's the sensitivity to the surface temperature of the tyre that is costing him, I believe.
Yeah.
Wow.
From looking into all the data.
It is fascinating because it really does, in this modern day and age, it comes down to the nuances of the regulations and the way the cars function and how that naturally suits or doesn't suit your driving style. And that can determine whether you're one of the all-time greats or an also-ran.
To the extent that you have a Red Bull, which one driver can make almost as fast as anything else out there, while another driver, who is no idiot, can barely get on the back of the grid in the same car.
That's a mystery to me. I honestly thought they'd be better with Tsunoda.
Yeah.
You know, as so many people did. So from the perspective of somebody that's driven a lot of cars but not in Formula One, you set a car up with a lot of front end, that takes some adaptation, right?
Yes.
As the driver, it might be a bit kind of intimidating to begin with, but the kind of folklore that Verstappen has this crazy front end on the car that no one else can manage. I mean, not for me. Not true.
Okay.
It would be. There must be more to it than that.
Yes.
There must be more to it than that, because drivers who make it to that level drive around the balance of the car, and they learn to manage the balance of the car as well. Teammates who've shared with me, who've jumped in from Formula One cars, can generate their own understeer by the way they drive.
Yes.
You manage the temperature of all four tires. You manage the tools inside the car. You give yourself the best possible. You give yourself the best possible balance, and you push the front tire a little bit harder and manipulate its temperature and its wear. All of a sudden, you can generate understeer over a race stint, right? So I think what we're looking at there is, again, it's a little bit like the situation for Lewis Hamilton. It's a driving style and a method of setup and maybe design that's so entrenched and complex in favor of one driver that the other drivers can't come in and do it. But why it's still losing me is actually when the drivers jump into that car, they're not bad. When you look at all of their results, they jump in, they take a race weekend to learn it, then passable, and then it just tails away with lack of confidence, which, again, is baffling. And it must be something so specific to that second seat. The team obviously don't understand it. Otherwise, they'd be able to counteract it.
Yeah.
So why would we, sitting outside, be able to decode it?
Yeah.
Weird.
See, this is why we need people who understand motorsport to talk about it.
Yeah.
Because these are insights you don't really get anywhere else.
So, V10 engines.
Sign me up.
Yeah. So my idea was to have V10 engines for the people who want them, and to have the hybrid V6, whatever you want, for for the manufacturers who've got cars to sell, and then use balance of performance to keep them on an even keel. It's not going to happen, is it?
Absolutely not. No, because I just so. The problem that you have there is a marketing issue, I think, and that's what it all comes down to, right? So I had the opportunity to talk with a relatively senior executive of original equipment manufacturer who are involved in Formula One, and I heard echoed what I've heard echoed so many times, which is, I personally would love to see V10s.
Yeah, but
I just simply cannot sign that off as a racing program.
Yes.
Which is tragic. And I don't necessarily agree, actually. I think, this concept that we must be putting on the track exactly what the OEM who's funding it needs to sell, I don't agree with. I think it's nonsense, because for me, motorsport has always been a demonstration of competence, right? General competence. Anybody watching, an Alpine or a Renault engine go around, an F1 circuit, thinks their Alpine or their Renault that they're going to buy for the street, thinks their Clio is anything like the car that they're watching,
It's for the birds.
it's for the birds.
Yeah.
So what you're doing there is going, look at this amazing, incredible racing machine that manipulates the air, that generates thousands of horsepower from £4.50 worth of fuel, right? If we can do that, imagine what we can do with your little sports car.
Yes.
Right? That's what you're saying.
Preach.
So for me, you don't have to demonstrate it by doing exactly the same thing, do you?
No, I think you're absolutely right. But no one's listening to that argument, I don't think, sadly. So listen, we're running out of time, but I just wanted to pull up one other thing. You're a traditionalist, it seems. You're like us, right? You posted something on Instagram that made it quite clear you are not into road cars with lane keep assist. You are not into autonomous driving. You're not into electrified versions of classic cars. I mean, that's stuff that we talk about every week, isn't it?
It is, absolutely.
So
I'm full on grumpy old man.
Yeah.
I've reached middle age in with abandon here.
Well, you found your second home on the Intercooler podcast. That's exactly what we're about here. So do road cars have an important part in your life?
Yeah, they do. They do. I mean, I end up sort of pounding miles into stuff just because I'm traveling between racetracks. But by way of that sort of rant, I just don't necessarily agree that these safety things are any safer, really.
Yeah.
I think we'd probably get a lot further by teaching people to drive cars properly to start with.
Correct.
But yeah, no, road cars do have a huge part. I'm pining massively after a historic Alpha at the moment, so that's probably going to be my next mistake.
It won't be a mistake. It won't be a mistake. But a road car, not a race car.
Yeah. A sort of like a GTA or similar. I mean, I think Alphaholics have which again was on the same complaint. I like to make clear that I'm not complaining about 2-litre saloons being made, resto mod saloons being made available on Instagram. I'm complaining about how expensive they are.
Yeah. I feel the same.
But yeah, I'm kind of delusional enough to believe that I could probably take a little Porsche or from shell form, or a little Alfa Romeo from shell form, and make it a drivable classic every day on the road. So I need to probably exercise that delusion by trying to do it.
Yeah, and
at
then you'll
some point
see.
and find out I can't.
Well, and not sell it for £1 million.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Well, yeah, I mean, I see a lot of this stuff because I'm obviously spending a lot of time around historic workshops, right? Which, again, disabuses you of the illusion that this stuff is complicated a little bit. I mean, I get it, right? I know that making them so they change gear and go and stop and the road noise is not intense and incredible is takes testing and it's hard. But, I don't understand why that stuff needs to be £1 million. It'd be amazing if it wasn't. Maybe it needs to be £1 million because somebody will pay £1 million for it, which is the answer to my question.
I think that is the answer to your question.
Well, honestly, I think some of them they have to charge that because it does cost that to do everything to an exceptionally high standard. But I do think you're right. These things could be stripped back and bare bones, and the stuff that really matters, the drive, you get that right, and everything else can be good enough.
Yeah, I mean, we've often talked about getting something like a sort of mid-60s, what you're talking about, an Alpha Giulia or whatever, and just doing enough to it so it's not annoying anymore. And that it's not going to let you down, and it's just nicely done with a bit of suspension, a bit of brakes, a bit more power, a few mod cons which people like in their cars, and that's not £1 million.
It shouldn't be.
And it's a lovely car. It's a mid-60s Alpha with the benefit of hindsight, which is what you want it to be.
Bend the bendy bits of metal so they do the right bendy things, and put an infotainment system in it. I mean, I'm sure there'll be owners of such workshops screaming at their wherever they get their good podcasts at the moment, going, it's more complex than that, Alex. I mean, I'd go even later still. I drove a early 2000s 2010 M3 a while ago, and it was brilliant bit of kit, and in a world where we're all shortly going to be forced to have electric cars or no cars at all, there's going to be surely a market for something which goes, stops, changes gear, runs on petrol, is enjoyable to drive and isn't annoying, and is in the 50 large mark, 40-50
exactly
large
mark.
I totally agree. I've said it myself several times.
You're bang on about that.
Yeah. Well, listen, I can feel us descending into a rant about modern cars now, all of us. So I think,
and that's what Dan and I do most weeks. So we're not going to do that now.
So Alex, we'll wrap it up. But listen, have a good time at Le Mans.
I might see you there.
Yeah, look out for Andrew. He'll be there. Thanks ever so much for coming on. And, well, let's do something again because that was really good fun. And to everyone watching, please remember to subscribe to the podcast channel, to the YouTube channel, if you're watching on YouTube. Follow the show if you're listening on a podcast app. And we'll make sure Alex comes back at some point because that was really, really good fun. Thank you, Alex.
Thanks, guys.